Margaret Ellison had buried the past so deep she almost believed it would stay there. But one glance at the necklace on the girl her son brought home tilted her entire world. The past had found her, right at her dinner table. The Ellison dining room was all glass and city lights. The kind of room meant for charity galas and photo spreads, not teenage introductions. "Mom, Dad, this is Lonnie." 16-year-old Ethan practically glowed as he pulled the chair out for the girl beside him. She was slender, brown-skinned, with her hair pulled into a neat puff and a nervous smile that didn't quite hide how tightly she clutched her bag. Margaret lifted her wine glass, the automatic hostess smile already on her face. Then she saw it. A small gold crescent moon hanging at the base of Lonnie's throat. Simple. Unmistakable. Her fingers went numb. The stem of the glass slipped slightly in her hand. "Not possible." "Mrs. Ellison," Lonnie said softly. "Thank you for having me." Margaret heard the words but couldn't push any back. Her eyes were locked on the pendant. Her own heartbeat drowned out the clink of cutlery, the soft murmur of the city below. "Mom." Ethan frowned. "You okay?" Thomas, seated at the head of the table, looked up sharply. First at Margaret's frozen expression, following the line of her gaze, to the necklace around Lonnie's neck. The shift in the room was subtle, but unmistakable. Something old and heavy had just landed between them. "Margaret?" he asked quietly. She blinked hard, forcing her eyes away from the pendant. Excuse me," she said, voice thin. "I just need a moment." She set the glass down too quickly and walked out, one hand rising instinctively to her own collarbone, where a necklace used to hang. Ethan watched her leave, confusion tightening his face. Lonnie shifted, shrinking slightly in her seat. "I didn't say something wrong, did I?" "No," Thomas said gently. "Not at all." But his eyes lingered on the crescent moon, the only object in the room his wife had truly looked at. Because whatever had just shaken Margaret Ellison to her core, it started with that necklace. Margaret shut the bedroom door with a shaking hand and turned the lock. For a moment she just stood there, back against the wood, breathing too fast. "It's a coincidence. It has to be." But she already knew it wasn't. She crossed to the far side of the room, to the tall wardrobe Thomas never opened. Behind neatly folded scarves and an old cashmere shawl was a narrow drawer. She slid it out, fingers fumbling. Inside lay a small black velvet pouch. She stared at it for a long second, then she picked it up and loosened the drawstrings. The crescent moon pendant slid into her palm. Same size, same curve, same soft gleam of worn gold. Her throat tightened. 19 years ago, in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and fear, a nurse had placed a tiny baby in her arms for the first, and last, time. "Just for a minute, dear. Your parents are handling the paperwork. You should rest." Margaret had cradled the infant, tracing the soft cheek with a fingertip, her own tears dripping onto the blanket. With shaking hands she had slipped this necklace, a gift she'd bought with her own money, under the edge of the swaddle, so it lay against the baby's skin. "Something of mine. Something she can keep." Then her mother had walked in with a clipboard and a tight smile. "It's done," she'd said. "She'll be adopted by a good family. This is the right choice, Margaret. You will thank us one day." An orderly had taken the baby from her arms. Margaret had reached out, but her father's hand closed around her wrist. "No scenes," he'd said quietly. "You made your decision." She hadn't seen her daughter again. For years she'd clung to one thought. At least she's safe. At least she's loved. Somewhere. Now a girl sat downstairs in her dining room wearing the same necklace Margaret had left on a newborn's chest. She closed her fist around the pendant until the metal dug into her skin. If that girl was who Margaret feared she was, then nothing her parents told her all those years ago had been true. And the worst decision of her life, a buried past, was now breathing in the present. When Margaret returned, the conversation at the table had sunk into an awkward, shallow silence. Ethan was stabbing at his potatoes without eating them. Lonnie sat very straight, hands folded in her lap, eyes on her plate. Thomas looked up the second Margaret walked in. "You all right?" he asked. She forced a nod and took her seat. "Sorry," she said. "Work message." The lie tasted metallic. Trying to sound normal, Thomas turned to Lonnie. "So, Ethan tells us you two met through the community center." Lonnie glanced at Ethan, as if checking if it was okay to talk. Yes. At the Lincoln Youth Center," she said. "He runs the robotics club on Saturdays. I help with the younger kids' coding sessions." Ethan perked up. "She basically runs them," he said. "The kids listen to her more than they listen to me." A tiny smile flickered across Lonnie's face. Thomas nodded, impressed. "How long have you been volunteering there?" "Since I was 14, she said. "I kind of grew up around places like that. So it just felt right to give back." Something in the way she said it made Margaret's stomach clench. Thomas let his gaze drift, deliberately casual. "That's a unique necklace," he said. "I don't think I've seen one like it before." Lonnie's hand went instinctively to the pendant. "This?" she asked. "It's old. I've had it as long as I can remember." "Family heirloom?" Thomas asked. Lonnie shook her head. "No. It was found on me." The air seemed to thin. "Found on you?" Ethan repeated. Lonnie nodded. Her eyes stayed on the table. "I was left outside a shelter as a newborn," she said quietly. "Lincoln Shelter. Someone heard me crying, called it in. The social worker said this was the only personal item on me. No note. No paperwork. Just the necklace." Margaret's grip tightened around her fork so hard her knuckles went white. Ethan stared, stunned. "You never told me that," he said. Lonnie shrugged one shoulder, small and tired. "It's not exactly first date conversation," she said, trying to make it a joke. It fell flat. Thomas looked at Margaret. Her face had gone pale, eyes bright with something he couldn't read: grief, panic, recognition. "Did you ever try to look for your birth parents?" Margaret's voice came out softer than she intended. Lonnie glanced up, surprised by the question. "I did," she said. "A few years ago. I requested non-identifying records. Thought maybe I'd get something, anything." "What happened?" Thomas asked. Lonnie hesitated. "A few weeks later," she said slowly, "I got a letter. No return address. Just typed. One sentence." Ethan leaned in. "What did it say?" She swallowed. "Stop digging. Some graves are sealed for a reason." The words landed like a stone in the room. Margaret's stomach turned. That cold, polished cruelty, it sounded exactly like something her mother would write. "And you stopped?" Margaret asked, her voice barely steady. "I was 15, Lonnie said. "Yeah. I stopped." Ethan blew out a breath, angry on her behalf now. "That's messed up," he said. "You had a right to know." Lonnie offered a small, brittle smile. "The world doesn't always care about my rights," she said. "So I decided to focus on what I could control. School. Tech. The kids at the center." Thomas watched his wife. Her eyes glistened. One tear slipped, and she brushed it away quickly, hoping no one saw. He saw. He just didn't yet know if the tear was for Lonnie. Or for the baby she told him she'd lost to adoption all those years ago. And if the timelines were what he suspected, those two stories were about to become one. Later that evening, after Lonnie had gone home and Ethan had retreated to his room in a storm of questions, Thomas found Margaret sitting on the edge of their bed, still in her dinner dress, staring at nothing. He closed the door behind him. "Margaret," he said softly. "Talk to me." She didn't look up. "You remember when I told you," she said, "about the baby I had, before you?" He sat down beside her. "Yes. I told you my parents arranged an adoption," she said. "That I never saw her again after the hospital. That I thought it was clean. Legal. Final. You said they didn't give you a choice," he replied. "I believed them," she whispered. "I wanted to believe them." Her mind slid back, against her will, to that hospital room. The fluorescent light. The scratchy gown. The way she'd felt both full and hollow at the same time. She'd been 20. Second-year university. On track for law school. Her parents had a wall calendar where they'd circled her future in red. When she told them she was pregnant, her mother hadn't yelled. That would have been easier. She'd just gone very quiet and said, "We are not doing this, Margaret." Her father had added the terms in a calm, businesslike tone. "If you insist on keeping this child, you pay your own tuition. Your own rent. Your own way. We will not fund your mistake." They'd laid out the alternative like a contract. "Let us handle it. We'll arrange a discreet adoption. You finish school. You move on. This doesn't have to define you." She'd cried. She'd argued. But in the end she'd signed nothing, and they'd still moved forward. After the birth, she'd begged for more time. Instead, her mother had arrived with a polished smile and said, "It's all been handled. She'll go to a good family." An orderly had taken the baby from her arms while she lay there, weak and bleeding and empty. Her father's hand on her wrist again. "It's done, Margaret," he'd said. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "I told myself she was in a warm house somewhere," Margaret said now, voice cracking. "With people who wanted her. I told myself she'd never feel what I felt that night." Thomas listened, his jaw tight. "But that girl tonight," Margaret whispered, "she said shelter. She said abandoned." Tears spilled freely now. "That's not an adoption, Thomas. That's being left like trash." "You don't know that it's her," he said, though his own gut was twisting. "She was found as a newborn outside Lincoln Shelter," Margaret said. 19 years ago. With this necklace." She opened her palm, showing the crescent moon. "How many babies like that do you think there are?" Thomas had no answer. "Someone made that anonymous call," she said. "Someone typed that letter telling her to stop digging. Does any of that sound like people who followed legal channels?" Silence pressed around them. Thomas finally spoke. "What are you going to do?" he asked. Margaret wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I don't know," she said. "But I can't sit in this house and pretend I don't recognize my own daughter's necklace." And downstairs, in his room, Ethan lay awake replaying every second of dinner, especially the way his mother looked at Lonnie, like she was seeing a ghost. The next morning, the air in the house felt heavy. Ethan didn't wait. The moment Margaret walked into the kitchen, he put his phone down and faced her. "Mom," he said, no preamble, "what happened last night?" She froze mid-step. "Ethan. You looked like you'd seen a dead person," he said. "And when Lonnie said she was abandoned, you almost dropped your fork. So can we skip the part where you say everything's fine?" Thomas, at the counter with a mug of coffee, watched them both. Margaret sat down. She suddenly looked older. "There are things I should have told you when you were older," she said quietly. "I just hoped I'd never have to." Ethan's eyes flicked to his father. "This about the baby you told Dad about?" Thomas inhaled sharply. "Ethan. You think I didn't hear that fight 3 years ago?" Ethan said. "Walls aren't soundproof." Margaret shut her eyes briefly. "Of course. Yes," she said. "It's about that." She didn't tell him everything. Not yet. But she didn't lie either. When I was 20, I had a baby girl, she said. Your grandparents insisted on an adoption. I believe they placed her with a family. I never knew where she went. I was told it was closed, that I'd never have contact. I tried to live with that. And you think, Ethan swallowed. You think Lonnie might be her? I think the timing and the story and that necklace are too much to ignore, she said. But I don't want to project my guilt onto her life. We need facts. Thomas spoke up. Lonnie mentioned she had some records, he said. From the shelter. Intake reports. Social worker notes. If she's willing, we could look at them. See if there's anything conclusive. Margaret nodded slowly. If she agrees, she said. It's her story. I won't force myself into it. Ethan thought for a moment. I can ask her, he said. She trusts me. At least she did yesterday before my family got weird. There was hurt in his voice that made Margaret flinch. I'm sorry, she said softly. I never wanted you in the middle of this. It's a bit late for that, he said, but there was no real bite. Just fear. He picked up his phone. I'll text her, he said. Ask if we can come by. I'll tell her you might be able to help fill in blanks. Margaret's pulse pounded. This was it. Either she was about to rip open a stranger's life. Or finally meet the daughter she'd thought she'd lost forever. If this story is touching you so far, please tap the like button and subscribe. Your support helps me keep telling stories that matter. Lonnie's apartment was small, tidy, and worn around the edges. Second-hand couch. Wobbly coffee table. A neat stack of textbooks on the counter. She looked more guarded than she had the night before. Do I need a lawyer? She asked, half joking, as she let them in. No, Margaret said quickly. You don't owe us anything. If you say no, we leave. Ethan stepped in. We just think we might know something. Or be connected somehow. But we don't want to assume. Lonnie studied their faces. Something in Margaret's eyes, fear, sorrow, hope, made her jaw unclench. Okay, she said. I'll show you what I have. She went to a small fireproof box in the corner, spun the dial, and opened it. From inside, she pulled a slim manila folder and laid it on the coffee table. These are copies, she said. The originals are with the agency. Margaret sat on the edge of the couch, hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. Thomas flipped the folder open. First page. Hospital intake summary, female infant. Approximate age, 1 to 3 days. Location found, sidewalk near Lincoln Shelter. Condition, cold, hungry, responsive. Personal item, gold crescent moon necklace. He looked up. Margaret had gone very still. He turned to the next document, a brief social worker note. Anonymous caller reported infant's location, he read aloud. Female voice. Refused to give name. Stated only, she'll be safer there. The words blurred for a second. Thomas suddenly saw it all, Margaret 20 years old, terrified, under her parents' thumbs. Her mother making decisions. Her father signing papers. The same cool, controlled cruelty in that line. She'll be safer there. Oh my God, he whispered. Margaret looked at him, eyes wide. It's her, Thomas said hoarsely. Margaret, this is your baby. Lonnie stared between them, confusion shifting into something sharper. What are you talking about? Margaret forced herself to meet her gaze. 19 years ago, she said, I had a daughter. I was told she was placed with an adoptive family. A closed adoption. I never knew their names. I never knew where she went. I thought she was, somewhere safe. Somewhere wanted. Her voice broke. I gave her a necklace that looks exactly like yours. She opened her hand. The twin pendant glinted in the dim light. Lonnie's face drained of color. "You're saying," her voice trembled. "You're saying I don't know for certain," Margaret said quickly. "Not without proof. But the dates match. The location matches. The necklace matches. And if my parents lied about the adoption." She didn't have to finish the sentence. Lonnie sat back slowly, as if someone had pushed her. For nearly 16 years, the question of who left me and why had lived in the back of her mind like a dull ache. Now a woman sat in her apartment claiming to be the person on the other end of that ache. And for the first time, Lonnie realized the answer she'd chased her whole life might hurt more than the question ever did. The room felt smaller. Ethan sat on the arm of the chair, elbows on his knees, staring at the pendant in Margaret's hand, then at the one around Lonnie's neck. "They're identical," he said quietly. Lonnie's fingers went to her own necklace, almost protectively. "Say you're right," she said, looking at Margaret. "Say your parents lied and I'm your kid. Why didn't you come for me? Why didn't you fight?" Her voice cracked on the last word. Margaret swallowed hard. "I wish I could tell you I was brave," she said. "I wasn't. I was 20. My entire life, my education, my housing, my future, was tied to my parents. They told me the adoption was legal, safe, final. They said I would only cause problems if I tried to interfere. They used every lever they had to make me believe I had no choice." She forced herself not to look away. "But I did leave you something," she said. "That necklace. I bought it with my own money. I slipped it on you when the nurse wasn't looking. It was the only thing I could give you that they couldn't control." A tear slid down Lonnie's cheek. "So you believed I was with some nice couple in the suburbs," she said flatly. "And that made it okay?" "No," Margaret said immediately. "It never felt okay. Not for one day. I just learned to live around the pain. I told myself going after you would make your life harder, not better." "And when did you tell him?" Lonnie jerked her chin toward Thomas. 2 years into our marriage," Thomas answered. "She told me she'd had a baby. That her parents arranged an adoption and forbade her from asking questions. She didn't know about the shelter. I only realized that part today, reading this." He tapped the social worker note. "My parents," Margaret whispered. "They said they'd arranged everything. If they abandoned you, if they made that call. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know." Lonnie hugged her arms around herself. "I grew up in 3 foster homes," she said. "The last one was good. They were kind. But before that, it wasn't exactly storybook. So forgive me if I don't feel warm and fuzzy about, we thought you were safe." Ethan finally spoke. "So you're my sister?" he asked, the word strange in his mouth. Lonnie let out a shaky laugh that wasn't really laughter. "I don't know what I am," she said. "I walked in yesterday hoping your parents would like me because I have a crush on you, and today I'm maybe your sister." Ethan's face flushed. "I didn't know," he said quickly. "If this is true, then I'm glad we didn't, Yeah," Lonnie said. "Same." For a moment, the absurdity of it all hovered between them. Then Lonnie's eyes went back to Margaret. "What do you want from me?" she asked. The question was simple, but her voice shook. "Because I've gone 19 years not knowing. I can go 19 more if this is just about you feeling better about yourself." Margaret flinched like she'd been slapped. "I deserve that," she said. "But no. This isn't about me feeling better. It's about you knowing the truth. All of it. If you want to confirm it, we can do a DNA test. Mother and child. No one else needs to be involved. And if you never want to see me again after that, I will respect that." She drew a shaky breath. "But if you are my daughter, then I owe you more than regret." Silence stretched. Finally Lonnie looked at Ethan. "What do you think?" she asked. He didn't rush. "I think," he said slowly, "you've wanted answers your whole life. And one just fell in your lap. It may be messy, but you deserve to know if it's real." Lonnie looked back at Margaret. "Fine," she said. "We'll do the test. If it says you're my mother, then we talk again. If not, we forget this ever happened." "Okay," Margaret whispered. "That's fair." But as they left with a DNA kit order receipt on Margaret's phone, none of them were prepared for what the results would stir up once the science removed all doubt. The test was done quietly. No clinics. No drama. Just a simple kit delivered to Lonnie's apartment. Swabs, envelopes, barcodes. They did it together at Lonnie's kitchen counter. Margaret's hands shook so much Lonnie almost took the swab from her. "Here," Lonnie said. "I've done lab kits before." A week later, an email arrived in both their inboxes. Lonnie stared at the subject line for a full minute before opening it. Relationship, parent/child. Probability, 99.9%. Conclusion, Margaret Ellison is the biological mother of the tested individual. She read it twice. Then 3 times. It wasn't a maybe. It wasn't a story. It was fact. Lonnie forwarded the email to Margaret with no subject. No message. Just the cold block of text. 10 minutes later, her phone rang. Margaret's name flashed on the screen. Lonnie let it go to voicemail. She spent the rest of the day at the center, keeping her hands and mind busy. Helping a 10-year-old debug a stubborn loop was easier than thinking about the woman who had given her life and then vanished from it. That night, she finally listened to the voicemail. "Lonnie, it's Margaret. I got the email. There's no easy way to do this. You don't owe me anything. But whenever you're ready, I would like to talk. Somewhere neutral. Somewhere honest. No more secrets. You can pick the place. Or tell Ethan. Or ignore this, if that's what you need right now. I'll be here. I'm so sorry." Lonnie deleted the message. Then she texted Ethan. "Lonnie. Tell your mom I'll meet her. One time. After that, we'll see." The rooftop of Ellison Tower was all glass railings and soft lighting, the skyline stretched out like a promise. Margaret stood by the edge, clutching a small velvet box in her hands. She turned when she heard the elevator doors open. Lonnie stepped out wearing jeans, a simple sweater, and the necklace. Her necklace. "Hi," Margaret said, voice barely steady. "Hi," Lonnie replied. No smile. No hostility. Just tired. They sat on a bench beneath a small tree trying its best to survive the wind. "I brought something for you," Margaret said, opening the box. Inside lay the twin crescent moon pendant, gleaming softly. "I had 2 made," she said. "Back then. I bought them myself. One for the baby I was supposed to bring home. One for me, so I'd always have something that matched hers. They took you before I could keep mine on. I've had it in a drawer ever since." Lonnie stared at it. "I don't need jewelry to know who I am," she said. "I know," Margaret said quickly. "You've become who you are without me. You don't need anything from me to be whole. But I thought, if you ever wanted a link that was yours to define, not theirs, this could be it." Lonnie reached out and touched the pendant, not picking it up, just feeling its weight. "You said you thought I was adopted," she said. "That you believed I was somewhere safe." "Yes," Margaret said. "I see now that I chose to believe it because the alternative was unbearable. I should have asked more questions. I should have pushed harder. I didn't. That's on me." "You were 20, Lonnie said quietly. "Scared. Dependent." "Yes," Margaret said. And now I'm nearly 40, with resources and power, and I still let that fear run my life. I let your existence stay a secret because I was ashamed. Ashamed of what I'd done. Ashamed of how little I'd fought. Ashamed of the kind of family I came from. She looked at Lonnie, eyes wet. I can't fix your childhood, she said. I can't give you back what you missed. I can only show up now. And accept whatever you decide I'm allowed to be in your life. Lonnie's jaw clenched. I spent years thinking whoever left me didn't care whether I lived or died, she said. Some days I hated that faceless woman. Some days I tried to make excuses for her. Some days I told myself she must have had a reason. She took a breath. Knowing you existed and didn't come for me, she continued. That was worse than not knowing at all. Margaret flinched. But knowing they lied to you too, that they threw me away like I was an inconvenience to be managed, her voice shook with anger now. That makes me hate a different set of people. I deserve some of that hate, Margaret said. I could have gone looking. I didn't. That's the truth. Lonnie was quiet for a long moment. Did you ever tell him? She asked finally. My father. Margaret shook her head. No, she said. We broke up before I found out I was pregnant. My parents made sure it stayed that way. By the time I knew, they'd cut off all contact. I told myself he was better off not knowing. Another lie I hid behind. Does he know now? Lonnie asked. Not yet, Margaret said. But if you want him to, I will find him. I will tell him everything. And if you ever want to meet him, I will get out of the way and let that be yours. A tear finally slipped down Lonnie's cheek. She wiped it away, irritated. This doesn't erase anything, she said. I know, Margaret replied. I'm not ready to call you Mom, Lonnie added. I haven't earned it, Margaret said. But, Lonnie went on slowly, I am willing to see what happens if we don't treat this like a one-time disaster to be contained. Margaret exhaled, a small, disbelieving sound. Okay, she whispered. We can start there. Lonnie picked up the pendant from the box and turned it over in her fingers. I'll wear it sometimes, she said. Not because of what you did. Because of what I decide it means. That's all I could hope for, Margaret said. And as they sat side by side under the city lights, a new idea began to form in Margaret's mind, one that wouldn't change the past, but might change the futures of girls who grew up like Lonnie did. 3 months later, the Ellison Foundation hall buzzed with quiet conversation. Banners lined the walls. The Lonnie Gray Tech Initiative. Empowering young women from foster care to build the future. Lonnie had chosen the name herself. Gray, neutral, in between. Not Ellison. Not Reyes. Something that belonged to her. Rows of seats filled with donors, mentors, students, and community leaders. A small stage stood at the front with a podium. Backstage, Lonnie adjusted the simple blazer she'd borrowed from Margaret. You don't have to do this, Margaret said softly. I know, Lonnie replied. But I want to. Not for you. For the girls out there who think their story ends at a file folder. Margaret smiled faintly. Then I'm honored to stand in the wings. Thomas squeezed Lonnie's shoulder as he passed. Break a leg, he said. You're the main event today. Ethan stepped onto the stage first. When the murmurs died down, he cleared his throat into the microphone. Thank you all for coming, he began. My name is Ethan Ellison. For most of my life, I thought I was an only child. Turns out, life had other plans. A ripple of soft laughter. Today isn't about money or speeches, he continued. It's about someone who walked into our house one evening and changed everything. For me. For my parents. And, starting today, for a lot of girls who've been told their past defines their ceiling. He looked toward the side of the stage where Lonnie waited. She is my sister, he said simply. And I've never been prouder to say that. He gestured toward her. Please welcome the person this initiative is named after, Lonnie Gray. Applause rose as Lonnie walked out, heart pounding. She stepped up to the podium and looked out at the crowd. Hi, she said. Her voice echoed just enough to remind her how big this moment was. I grew up with a file instead of a baby album. If you've ever been in foster care, you know what I mean. She told them, briefly and plainly, about the shelter, the necklace, the homes that broke her and the one that didn't. She did not tell them everything. Some things were still hers. But I'm not here because of what was missing, she said. I'm here because of what I found: computers, code, community. A way to build something no one could take from me. She glanced to the side. Margaret stood there, hands clasped, eyes shining. And now, Lonnie said, we get to make sure other girls like me don't have to choose between surviving and dreaming. They get both. She finished to standing applause. For the first time, when she looked at Margaret, the emotion in her chest was more complicated than anger. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it wasn't only rage either. And as the crowd dispersed toward the reception, Margaret knew there was one more person who needed to be there, someone she had finally found the courage to call. Later that afternoon, after the speeches and handshakes and staged photos, the building grew quiet. In a glass-walled room off the main hall, Lonnie sat with a shy 12-year-old girl, guiding her through a basic circuit board. See? Lonnie said. You didn't break it. You just wired it out of order. Try swapping these two. The girl's face lit up when the tiny LED blinked to life. I did it, she said. You did, Lonnie replied. Remember that feeling. You'll need it when life tells you you can't. In the hallway, Margaret watched them through the glass. Beside her, Thomas slipped an arm around her shoulders. She's good with them, he said. She's everything I hoped she'd be, Margaret replied, voice thick. And more. You know this doesn't erase what happened, Thomas said gently. But it does mean you're doing something with it. She's not my mistake, Margaret whispered. She's my miracle. Thomas squeezed her shoulder. A soft sound behind them made them turn. A man stood at the end of the hallway, just inside the open doorway. Early 40s. Dark hair threaded with gray. Neatly pressed shirt, tie loosened. Hands clenched at his sides like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to be there. His eyes were fixed on the girl in the glass-walled room. Margaret's breath caught. Daniel, she said. He tore his gaze away from Lonnie and looked at her. For a moment, nearly 20 years folded in on themselves. The hurt of their abrupt breakup. The life they never had. The daughter he never knew about. I almost didn't come, he said quietly. The email. I thought it was a scam at first. I wouldn't blame you, she said. After what I did. After what I didn't tell you. He swallowed. You said I had a daughter, he said. That she grew up in foster care. That you only just found her. I kept reading those lines over and over. His voice shook now. I would have stayed, he said. If I'd known. I would have fought for both of you. I know, Margaret said. He looked past her again, to where Lonnie was laughing with the 12-year-old, the pendant glinting at her throat. Does she know I'm here? He asked. No, Margaret said. Not yet. I told her I'd reach out to you if she wanted. She said she wasn't ready then. Today, after her speech, she told me she was ready to start hearing more of the truth. I thought, if you came, we could take the next step when she's ready to walk through that door. Daniel's eyes shone. Do you think she'll want to meet me? He asked. I don't know, Margaret said honestly. But I know she deserved the choice. And I stole that from both of you for long enough. They stood there for a moment, three people divided by glass and time. Inside the room, the 12-year-old girl packed up her bag. Lonnie walked her to the door, ruffled her hair, and watched her run off down the corridor. When she turned back, she saw Margaret. Then she saw the man standing beside her, the one whose eyes looked strangely like her own. Her steps slowed. Margaret's heart hammered. "Lonnie," she said, voice soft. "There's someone I'd like you to meet. Only if you want to." Lonnie looked from Margaret to Daniel. The question she'd carried her whole life rose again, but it felt different now. This time, she wasn't a baby on a sidewalk or a file in a folder. She was a young woman who'd built a life, made choices, and stood on her own feet. She took a breath. "Okay," she said. "I'm listening." Daniel's hands shook. He took one cautious step forward. "Hi," he said, voice rough. "I'm Daniel. I think I might be your father." Lonnie studied his face. The lines of worry. The hope. The regret. Her fingers drifted to the two necklaces now hanging side by side at her throat, the one she was found with, and the twin Margaret had given her on the rooftop. For the first time in her life, the question "who do I belong to?" didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a door. Maybe a broken one. But a door she could choose to walk through, or not. She took another breath. "We can talk," she said. "That's a start." A small, shaky smile touched Daniel's mouth. "I'd like that," he said. Margaret stepped back, letting the two of them fill the space she'd once left empty. As Lonnie and Daniel began their first halting conversation, Margaret looked out the window at the city below. For years she believed some stories were sealed forever. But the girl who'd been left on a cold sidewalk was now building circuits, scholarships, and second chances inside a tower bearing the name of the family that had tried to erase her. Sometimes the past didn't vanish. It circled back, demanding to be faced. And sometimes, against every expectation, the people broken by that past found a way to build something new, not perfect, not clean, but real. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes healing is possible. Subscribe for more stories that remind us, family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up when the truth finally comes out, and chooses to stay.